Hey, everyone. Welcome to Strange Stories, where we explore near-death experiences and supernatural stories from people who've had a glimpse of the other side. If you enjoy our content, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel. Without further ado, let's get to the story of the day. In 1971, I married. I took a diving course and worked for 14 years as a dive teacher. The final exam for the second-class diving certification was held in Cap de Cruz, Rosas, at a depth of 35 meters on an underwater mountain's esplanade. Going down, taking off one's mask, putting it back on, asking a buddy for air, making a little journey around the top of the mountain, and going back up, making stops, was all that was required for the test. Normally, the sport is performed on Sunday to facilitate it. They, the club, decided to conserve money that year, so they did without other instructors or me. Typically, each class has one instructor. The pool tests were conducted with one instructor and 4 pupils. An additional instructor was present for the ocean testing. The exam was scheduled for a Sunday, but they had to wait 3 Sundays due to heavy winds and ocean currents at the diving site, which made the sea muddy and churned up. When the wind seemed to have died down one Sunday, they all summoned for the certification exam. I had informed my wife that I would not be attending the exam because I had not been summoned for the course that year. The ocean is and has always been my obsession. I gathered my family and we headed to Rosas at 7 a.m. as if someone had called and told me I should go. I arrived just in time to board the boat and inquired if I may go. They replied yes. Because I knew the principal teacher, I joined the group that was leaping first. I didn't like the smell of the boat, and when it came to a stop, I was all prepared and ready to leap with my double tanks. My group consisted of 4 professors and 4 pupils. They dispatched me to check on the boat's anchor because I was the first to jump off, and that's when the adventure began. When I started the descent by myself, I grabbed the anchor rope and went down meter by meter. Initially, I encountered 10 meters of clear water and 10 meters of murky water. I continued descending, discovering clear and unclean layers of water until I reached the bottom at 42 meters. The water was murky, with no visibility deeper than 4 meters. I grabbed the anchor and searched for a rock or something to fasten it, but the entire seafloor was mud. We'd anchored 35 meters away from the peak, presumably due to ocean currents, and there were no rocks to tie the anchor with, so I opted to surface. Once above, I informed the boat captain about the water conditions and currents, as well as the fact that the anchor was not properly secured. When I inquired where my group was, they logically told me that they were headed towards the coast to have less depth in case they couldn't catch the seamount. It might seem rational to expect reduced depth closer to shore, yet this is not the case on the Costa Brava. The bottom is the same as the surface of the water, as the name implies. Costa Brava meaning rough or wild coast. Within 100 meters of the coast, you can find quite varied depths ranging from 7 meters to 400 or even 900 meters. My group of 4 instructors and 4 students was 100 meters distant from the boat. When I arrived, the group had already sunk, with the exception of 1 pupil who was having difficulty with pressure compensation at the surface. While I was giving him advice on how to adjust, I noticed that the people who were going down were doing it really badly because they were going down foot first instead of gliding down, making circular spins to fall more slowly and compensate better. The student next to me began to descend, foot first. I descended, making circles around the bubbles rising to the surface, adjusting and keeping an eye on the depth monitor. Because there were 10-meter thick dirty layers, I assumed they expected to discover the bottom after the dirty zone. My stupor increased as I approached 40 meters, 50 meters. I came to a halt at 58 meters, since the gang had reached bottom at 62 or 64 meters. I sought out the principal teacher, showed him my depth gauge, and informed him that we needed to return to the surface. The ascent was immediately commanded by the chief instructor. Great. We've got to go up another 60 meters, I thought. What a jerk. This wasn't my first time doing this, so I began ascending alone, visualizing myself as a dive stick, expecting each instructor to grasp a student and everyone to ascend in pairs. I passed a couple with their arms clasped after a few meters and gave them the OK sign. One of them made the regulate sign, and I observed the other, who turned out to be a girl, had her eyes closed and was unconscious. Because I had a life vest but no tank to fill it, I elected to inflate it by blowing. I was rescued by the other diver, but after 3 or 4 blows to inflate it, I suffered from anoxia, loss of oxygen in the brain, and lost consciousness. This is how my experience began. I felt as if I was losing control of my sphincters within me. I also heard beep, 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 beep. I ended up in the tunnel. I had no idea what that was. The tunnel was like a hurricane's eye, but I was within. It was all black and white. There was a beautiful white light above and in the distance, in the shape of a partially open door toward which I was heading. I had no body and was not in the water. I felt really relaxed and at ease, with a lovely sensation of peace and well-being. There are no words to explain the joy I felt at those moments. The joy and well-being I was experiencing felt as if 100 women were touching you. It's a saying. This was something really, really good. After a short distance, I heard a voice say to me in Catalan, my home language, "Paulo, they're in the water. Open your mouth and fly." It was a nice voice, sweet and solid, but authoritative and insistent at the same time. But I wasn't even in the water. I couldn't even feel my body. I didn't have a mouth, eyes, or anything else. I felt a great heat till I heard someone calling to me from a distance. I opened my eyes to see a blue sky. I turned to see who was calling, and I had the distinct sensation that I had experienced this experience before. I'm fine, I replied. I noticed the boat and moved toward it from about 100 meters distance. They assisted me up, and I begged for assistance in taking my suit off. Those who assisted me in removing it were repulsed by the odor it gave off, since, having lost control of my sphincters, the uric acid left a strong odor. The other divers were approaching. The encounter on the upper deck of the boat in broad daylight shocked me. When the other parties returned to the boat, they reported that one person had gone missing. I then inquired as to who had assisted me in inflating the vest for a person in distress, but no one responded. They reported 2 people missing a half hour later. I then informed the national instructor, who was in charge of the exam, about my experience with 2 young couples. Some of the teachers returned to the ocean and called the Coast Guard and the Red Cross for assistance. They did what they could, but the bodies of the 2 young couples were not discovered for 24 hours for one and 48 hours for the other. They both died of heart attacks because they had no water in their lungs. The sensation lasted a long time for me. I believe I climbed to the surface because I had inflated my vest and was climbing in order to descend more slowly than the others. At 200, the air is compressed. I would have kept inflating my vest, pushing me to open my glottis and let air out of my trachea. The vest also featured a safety valve, which led me to rocket up the final meters to the surface. They watched my body emerge out of the water from the boat at about 100 meters, forcing my lifeless arms to create a signal for aid, and the air from the regulator was gushing out in a stream. The guy who jumped in to get me stated I had my eyes wide open as he got closer. He claimed that his years of experience had already taught him what it meant. To summarize, it wasn't my time, but I had to go that day to see the 2 deaths